Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is another great day with another great fun chat. These historical little nuggets of the 1950s are certainly worth capturing on our video and back into our YouTube channel. And then, of course, we disperse them to all kinds of Facebook groups, too. So one way or another, we hope that you or your friends or your family catch what we are recording.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you're watching this, welcome. Would like to direct your attention to the bottom of your screen and note the www.wildthewindmillwatch.com. That is a site we hope you will go to find out all sorts of information about this fun chat, as well as the book that is up in the corner of your screen. While the Windmill Watched a Slice of Rural America in the 1950s kind of kicked off this fun chat. You can find all sorts of information there where you purchase the book. We have over 50 vendors, and we are over 250 fun chats. So there's a lot of rural education information that we have here on the site as well as in the book. You also can find out where the authors will be signing books, where they'll be speaking, and any sort of information that you might want to know or find out that you didn't want to know, but at that site. So we will start now this morning with a gal who comes to us from Iowa. Janine and I have been recording fun chats for over 5 years, yielding, as I mentioned, all close to 250 recordings of the history of events, people, places, and things. So this chat comes under the things category and is now added to the list of containing such things such as rubber duckies, old organs, pearl buttons, renewed small towns, country churches, magazines, dolls, and just to name a few. But Sara Slater is going to tell us about Albert, a very large Hereford bull statue, which is on display in the state of Iowa. Welcome, Sara, to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share.
Oh, good. So why is there a large statue of a bull named Albert in Iowa? And where is this guy located?
We're in Audubon, Iowa, so we are halfway between Omaha and Des Moines. And in the 1950s, the local beef producers sold cattle, predominantly fall through early winter. And they built him in 1963, completing him in 64, to basically capture and celebrate the beef production in the state of Iowa, and especially in our county. And that is why we have Albert the Bull, who's been here since that time.
Okay. As I read through some information, I realized that this bull has a connection to windmills, not our windmill, but windmills. So his frame was made of salvaged metal from abandoned windmills.
Some pieces.
Isn't that interesting? Tell us. I think it's interesting. Anyway, tell us how that happened.
His main structure is I-beams, and then they created his actual shape using steel pieces. And so some of those probably were from windmills because it was a lot of, finding local resources. But he's got a big rectangle I-beam structure as the main piece of him. Mm-hmm. And then they welded and kind of created his skeleton, if you would say.
Okay. Sara, has Albert ever had any damage done because of high winds or tornadoes that have come through?
No. About 5 years ago, we had to do we had the most work done, and we kind of said he had a facelift. Because of his texture, we have to use a very specific paint that doesn't collect water, because we had a little piece of his concrete come off, and it was because of moisture. And so it's like an elastic rubberish paint that we have to use. But otherwise, they said he looks fantastic. for being 64 since 64. So
Yeah.
We could all take a lesson from that, couldn't we?
yeah.
That's the
You just
secret.
need paint.
Elastic paint or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't know it existed, but that's what we did, and he looks great.
Okay, so why was it a Hereford breed chosen rather than any other breed?
In that timeline, so like the 1950s, that was the #1 breed in the state of Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also found out the National Hereford Association helped give technical assistance and made a donation when they were constructing him.
Nice.
But that's primarily the breed of cattle you would have seen around the Iowa in that timeline.
And now what breed has taken its place?
It's probably a little bit more Angus, but it's a mixture. And you still see Herefords. It's more of a mixed, different types of breeds and versus one.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And the replica behind you of Albert demonstrates the look that he has as the statue in the Audubon City Park. Can you tell us about his life in the Audubon City Park?
Yeah, so he sits on the south end of town in the actual Albert the Bull Park. So he's very prominent, like from 71, and he's about 30 feet tall. His horn span is 15 feet across. And then he weighs about 45 ton. And when they originally painted him, it took about 65 gallons of paint to get him completely covered. And it was a local artist at the time that actually painted him. His name was Cam Ross.
Okay, so where did the Albert come from then?
So Albert Cruz was one of the bank presidents. And so in 1951, some of the feeders would go on the train when they took him to Chicago. But it sounds like they rode in like a caboose. And so Albert said, I would go if they had a Pullman car. And so they talked to the railroad and they basically got a Pullman car. And then Al and the train officials and a lot of the feeders basically went to Chicago and they decided to name it Operation T-Bone. And it was a big celebration. And when they get to Chicago, I have some photos.
Let me enlarge that. Whoops, I'm sorry. Okay. Wrong one. Okay, here we go.
So they would all go.
Oh my. Look at that group.
And it was just a really great time. Let me see what else I have. And then they would have like a big dinner together at the hotel. Yes. And it was just a really big celebration. And that is what has continued since 1951.
So do you suppose when all those gentlemen left the farm, the ranch, to make that trip to Chicago, did their wives go with them or were the wives staying home doing the chores?
So in all the photographs, it was just the men that went. I think the wives stayed home and, looked after the farm and the kids. And then there was a celebration on a local level also, with a parade and events, and that has continued to this day.
Okay. You talked about a parade. Was there anything livestock related in the parade or was it just bands or floats or how did that work?
I think they're, looking back at old photographs and asking a lot of people, you would have people riding horses. There was no live cattle or anything, but it was just your typical, bands, floats, businesses. And it was just a big celebration of kind of getting to that time of the year that they were able to sell their cattle.
Well, tell us the story of from the feedlot to the train and then to the Chicago stockyards.
So we have records that they've, there was a committee formed, and I don't know what year that was, but it was 10 businesses and 10 feeders. And so they kind of run the celebration. And so that is kind of who runs the parade and whatnot. But they would take the cattle from the cattle farm, and it was Audubon County and maybe a little bit surrounding. And those cattle would be taken in straight trucks to the train depots. depends on where the train went. But like Audubon, I know they made stops in Carroll, they made stops in Atlantic, and then they would load those cattle on. And then at one time, I know there were like 6 Pullman cars that would then take the cattle, and they would travel with their cattle. And so we have a couple photos to kind of give you that idea.
And how are those cattle differentiated from who had consigned them? Were they marked with a paint branding of some sort when they got in the car, the cattle car?
It depends on how many they had, because there were so many that would fit in a car. I think it was about 20 that would fit on a car. So if that feeder had enough, then that was their car. Sure. Otherwise, they just, so there would be probably ear tags would be my guess, or they would probably have done a chalk mark. They would have identified that cattle to make sure it got to the right owner.
Yes. And one would think too that when they got to the stockyards, those feeders know their cattle, and they would be able to make sure that the cattle were, the sale of those particular cattle went to them.
Yeah, and I know they would have weighed those cattle when they loaded them. So there might have been a bill at that time when they would unload that would have said, here's what they are. So it wasn't as a big deal when they got to Chicago. And then after Chicago, they would then take them to the stockyards in Omaha by truck.
Okay.
So it's just evolved with the times, but it's kind of still stayed true to its original roots of kind of how it was done.
Well, this is kind of leans away from Operation T-Bone, but it's really the start of when the feeder calf comes to the farm. Do you have any history of how those feeder calves were acquired, or how they got to be a part of the cattle feeding industry then in Audubon County?
So I've kind of been doing some research a little bit just for this. So back in that timeline, we would have had, I think the earliest census I could find was 1952. There were 830 farms that would have had cattle. And in the 2022 census, we have 300 farms with cattle and calves.
Yeah. And which year, 2022, you said?
Yes.
That's 300. Okay.
But I don't think we have any less cattle per se. We probably have more livestock. It's just evolved. So like they would have either raised those cattle themselves. Some would have had the cow calf herd that they would have weaned and then fed those cattle out, or they would have bought them. Could have been a sale barn. Like today, a lot of the local feeders, have a cattle buyer. They bring in cattle from, it could be from Nebraska, Oklahoma, like it just, wherever those cattle are bought, they're brought in and they're fed.
Sure.
And so I think it's probably the same concept. Maybe it's just changed, and there may be less farms, but those farms are bigger.
Yeah, sure. Are there similar, the names that were shipping cattle with Operation T-Bone in the 50s, are those names still prevalent today as cattle feeders and part of Operation T-Bone in the county?
We've lost a lot of the original ones that when I look back through the history, because you could see those names. But we still have some that are still here that had their grandfathers, great grandfathers that were part of that. Still feeding today. A family member is still doing that. And it's now, the grandkids. So yes, maybe not, they're not all of them, but there's still a significant amount that was part of that original piece.
So what makes Audubon County uniquely favorable for feeding cattle? Is there something special about that area?
I think a lot of it is we have the feed here, the cattle, the corn, all the things that they need, that it just makes it an ideal space that you're not trucking in feed with adding cost. It's here. Yeah. They're growing the corn that feed the livestock. They have great, animal care with a veterinary, the local veterinarians. Like it's kind of just, we're set up to do it. And it's been that way. And I don't think that has changed.
Yeah.
Are there any other situations such as what happens in Audubon County with cattle feeding in the United States? Do you ever hear of anything like that? The celebration of it?
I'm sure there is. I probably haven't paid attention, but when I think of, San Antonio, they have the cattle drive, like that.
That's true.
They would have probably driven those to market. It would be similar to us, instead of by horseback, they're throwing ours on trains.
Yeah.
I think, any state or location that has that rural agriculture piece, there's a celebration of what makes them their community.
So the trains were used in the
giant bowl.
50s. Oh, excuse me.
Excuse me? What?
They just don't have a giant bowl.
Okay.
Yeah. So trains were used in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
What is used for transporting cattle these days?
So these days, most of them are semis. So there is 10 head that are fed, that are owned by the T-Bone Committee, that are fed in a big feedlot. And then those are used in trailers to a local sale barn for T-Bone. And then the rest of the farmers, it's not a certain timeline anymore. It's whenever those animals are ready to go and they're sold. But primarily it's 100% semi trucks.
Do many feeders get in cattle, or perhaps they've raised their own cattle, anticipating that those cattle will be ready to be shipped in? And is Operation T-Bone in September?
It was originally in September, and then it was moved to the first Friday in August.
August. Oh.
Yeah. And I think it's
because calves are being born earlier in the year?
They are, but I also just think, September, they're in harvest, they're in the field.
Yeah.
So then August, it's just more convenient. And then what's really fun about this, since moving it to August, all the class reunions that have graduated locally have moved those reunions to this weekend. And so it's just a really fun celebration because you're getting all these people who, grew up here and maybe have moved off, but they're coming back. And so it's just a really fun time.
Did you grow up there?
I did. And I moved away and I brought my family back. But I grew up on a farm. My grandpa was one of the early shippers, and my brother and my father still raise cattle to this day.
Oh, you really have a personal interest in this project then.
Yeah, it's just, and there's, a lot of us that have those connections that just, it's the roots and it's our history.
That's right.
Did when you have the reunion of folks who return to Audubon for Operation T-Bone, are the celebrations held in Albert the Bull Park?
There's a picnic every year that's at Albert, and the cattlemen grill burgers, and it's just a big community picnic. And then everything else is uptown in our square park.
Okay.
And so they have like a car show, and there's a tractor kind of exhibit, and then the parade. And so everything's kind of centered around our downtown area at that time. What
would a tourist find when they went to Albert the Bull Park, other than this big statue of a bull?
So we have a campground. So we have a lot of people camping, and it's kind of in the center of all things summer recreation. There's the swimming pool, that's the community pool. All the ball fields are right there. The football field is right behind him. So he's just in a really prominent, there's just lots of activity. And then back in 22, we built a train car replica that sits beside him. It's not a full-size train car, it's a scaled-down version, but we put a lot of this history, and we have signage that kind of talks about the eras of how T-Bone kind of came about and told the story of why Albert is there. And then we have a penny machine that you can roll out a penny in there. And so we just really felt it was important to share the history behind why Albert is here.
Yes.
Okay. And what's on that penny then? What's the imprint on that penny?
There is one of Albert the Bull.
Oh,
and
of course.
There's one, I think it's a bird that says Audubon County. There's 4 different designs you can pick. You put your quarters in and put your penny in, and you crank the machine.
Whoa, that sounds like a profitable venture.
Well, we thought it's kind of a fun way to capture his paint fun. We have to repaint him every so often.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's about 20,000 people that come on an annual basis to visit,
Oh, okay.
and all times of day. And so, if you're here after hours, you can't leave with a souvenir. And we thought this way everybody could take something if they wanted to with them, regardless of what time of day you stopped.
Is he lighted at night?
He is.
Oh.
And they put a wreath on him at Christmas. He's had a party hat for his birthday. 2 years ago, we gave him a giant bow tie.
Does he talk?
There is a little recording that someone tells a story of him. There's a little kiosk that has some photos and just explains a little bit.
So you can't pull his tail and he talks.
No, but he's one of, the top things of what people are stopping to take photos of on an annual basis. And it's just really fun to see. And like the kids just adore him.
Sure. Don't you wonder how many of those photos end up as the family photo on a Christmas card?
I would probably be a lot, I would assume, just because it's just fun. And when you're seeing him, there's just a lot of joy, it's just.
Right.
Can you tell our listeners or viewers, where is Audubon County in Iowa?
We are basically 75 miles west of Des Moines. And then we're about 16 miles north of the interstate on Highway 71.
Okay.
And we're the third smallest county in the state of Iowa. We're seeing a lot of growth right now. We're having a lot of people move back. We're seeing a lot of new businesses. And so it's just a really fun time to be here.
Yes.
So is this county named after the Mr. Audubon?
Yes. Okay. John James Audubon. So we have our whole downtown has mosaic tiles depicting the birds of America from his book.
Oh, cool.
And we have statues. So we kind of have half of our roads in the county are named after birds. So we're very much part of, honoring that history of the birds, birding.
Yes. So this is off the topic, but what's the state bird of Iowa?
It's the Baltimore Oriole.
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Yes. Nice too.
I'm curious, going back again to Operation T-Bone and the I'm going to say the movement from the 50s into where we are now today at the Operation T-Bone. Is there an outlet at a sale barn where cattle are all gathered now, or does that not happen anymore? Is that only off the farm where they're loaded out?
They load them out for T-bone in particular. They have 10 head that are that committee has at a large custom feeding marketplace that they have. And so they load them and they all go down together, and anybody could go down to, but it's a local sale barn, probably 30 minutes from here, that they all go with and kind of capture that piece. But there's not like 20 farmers selling their livestock at the same time like they did in the 50s.
Sure. And have there been other changes from the 50s as part of celebrating the event from the 50s till nowadays?
Yeah, I think it just evolves, kind of what they do. I don't have some of the early stuff of what their festival was. The parade probably has changed a little bit just as far as what participation they get, but they have, vendors, and they have just the T-Bone committee does a big steak feed every year during the park, and there's entertainment, and it just kind of changes depending on who's planning it and kind of what they do. But in the theory, it's very comparable every year.
Okay. Do you have to live in Audubon County in order to participate in Operation T-Bone with your cattle?
I think they had some people outside of the county at that time. So I think it was just the area feeders that all kind of came together and celebrated.
So is there a fee to be a part of this Operation T-Bone?
The committee itself so there's 20 members those are members, but the celebration in the local, no, it is completely free for anybody to come see and participate. Albert, to come visit him is free.
Yes. Well, what I was saying is if you're an Operation T-Bone member,
Mhm.
have you paid a fee to have that honor of being a member or not? Like
Yeah,
being,
you have to pay. There's a membership. I don't know what that membership
okay, there's a
is.
membership. Okay.
And it's kind of geared 10 businesses, 10 feeders. It's kind of been the markup. And then those guys, it's not just about one day a year. You know, they will go and cook, grill burgers and whatnot for different celebrations or functions in the community throughout the year, promoting beef.
Sure.
Okay.
So that's kind of their main goal. So you do see them throughout the year at functions, cooking and participating where they can.
Fun.
Is there a queen of Audubon County, a beef queen, or?
There used to be, not so much anymore. We've had different, you know, looking back through the history, you know, they've had different nights and like different things, and it's just kind of, it changes. It depends on who's playing, participating. Albert has had some fun little success though. Like he's been featured on Jeopardy. He's been in a couple movies. So it's always kind of, he was in a Super Bowl commercial.
Oh, really?
For Cenex. So he's kind of, those are the fun things that kind of make it special when you see him getting those little nods.
Yes. And does he get a refreshing paint job ahead of those special events?
We always try to make sure, like for the Super Bowl commercial, yes, he was due for a paint, so we did get him fixed. And then sometimes, you know, it's just, you're always kind of surprised when you see photos of who stopped, or, you know, there's been race cars there with them. And I think, you know, the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile has been there. And like, there's just different things that kind of stop and take photos. So it's always fun to see and check to see who's taking photos with him.
Do you recall how Albert was used in the Super Bowl commercial?
If you go, it's on a Cenex commercial. So the whole point was it's a Super Bowl. And so there were local community members that were there, and they had like, it was the whole thing, and he was in the background, and we had band and cheerleaders and it was the whole thing, and it was super fun for the whole community to have that. And it was a fun time to participate in that.
Yes. Has there ever been a time when the community said, I wish we didn't have that bull in the park?
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that ever. I think, you know, when you talk to people who graduated here, you know, when they see him, it's like, it's their home. So I think to me, he represents more than just beef. I think for those of us who live here or have been here, you know, when you see him, hey, I'm home. And I think that to me says a lot. He's more than just a statue to the community.
Yes.
Great.
Well, and I would think, not only does he represent being home, but think of all the wonderful memories that a person has of being home, and whether they were in the cattle feeding business or their family was, or they're just they live in town and they're part of Audubon, Iowa, or surrounding towns in the county.
Right.
It means home. It's the grounding of who you are. If you, Do you, Sarah, does your family have any special recollections of when they would have shipped cattle to Operation T-Bone?
I've asked this. My dad was just a really very young, small child, so he does not at that time. And then, but others do, you know, they remember going, and we have some photos of different, you know, kids. Like it was just kind of like the thing that you wait for all year to happen. So I think, you know, everybody has different memories. There's lots of people who volunteered to help build Albert, and those guys still talk about being part of that to this day. There's volunteers that help, you know, take care of Albert and maintain different things. And he's just utilized in a lot of different ways.
Is he standing in grass or a flower bed or what?
He's on a concrete platform, and then he has a sidewalk come up to him, and then the train cars that's to the left of him. We didn't want to obstruct anybody's photographs. And so it's far enough, you can still get your shot of Albert. And then there's, some natural habitat plantings around the train car. But it's pretty much very comparable to what it would have looked like when they originally built him. The city had donated that land at that time when they wanted to do this. And it's primarily stayed the same.
Okay.
Well, Sarah, this has been exciting to learn about Albert Bowl. Yes.
Yes.
And especially about the importance of Albert to the cattle feeding industry in Audubon County, Iowa. You guys have really captured the essence of home in your county and the history of it. Thank you so much for sharing with us. It's been wonderful.
We'd love for you to guys come visit. We'll make sure if you do get a photo with Albert.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Jackie, how can you close our program today?
Thanks so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. And viewers, look at the thumbs up button and the subscribe button, and do consider putting your finger or your cursor on that and joining us. So until next time, tell your friends and your relatives about this 1950s fun chat. Till that time, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.